What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to talk about the Hero RB draft strategy. To me, this is the best overall strategy out there because it takes the best aspects of double Hero RB, drafting a running back early, and zero RB, getting really strong wide receivers through your flex, and prioritizing elite quarterbacks and tight ends. To me, it is ultra reliable. You can use it anywhere, any format, any draft, any league, any scoring settings, any place, anytime, anywhere. Hero RB will come through for you. So today, we're going to break all of that down, what the definition of it is, how to use it, why it works. We're going to go through 3 different mock drafts as well so you can see exactly how these teams should look like in 2024. All I ask is that we put a lot of time and effort into these videos, so if you enjoy, make sure to go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen.
So let's define the Hero RB draft strategy. I would say you're taking your RB1 inside of the first 3 rounds with an emphasis of that running back having RB1 overall upside. You're not taking your RB2 until round 7 or later. Your goal should be to have wide receivers to fill your flex spot, plus another 1 or 2 by round 10. And ideally, you have an elite quarterback and or tight end. And the beauty of this strategy is it works in all formats. 8-person league, 12-person league, 14-team league, super flex, tight end premium, whatever you need, half PPR, full PPR, this strategy will work for you. Now, when we talk about Hero RB and the idea of Hero RB, why just one running back? And why does this Hero RB have to have RB1 overall upside? Well, running backs early on are super fragile. If we look at over the last 3 years, the top 24 running backs in ADP versus the top 24 wide receivers in ADP, running backs are missing 4 or more games 1.35 times more often than wide receivers in terms of missing 4 or more games. And if we just look at last year, it was an absolute graveyard in terms of running backs in the top 12 or the top 10 of ADP versus wide receivers in the top 10 of ADP. Outside of McCaffrey, when we look at just raw PPR points, it is brutal, right? You have Eckler who busted. Nick Chubb busted. Saquon wasn't great. JT wasn't great. Jacobs busted. Ramondre wasn't good. Of course, Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Garrett Wilson weren't great, but none of these guys were just straight zeros, like a guy like Nick Chubb was last year. And then even still, Tyreek, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown absolutely crushed last year, and even Devontae Adams wasn't that bad. So the idea is that if we're going to draft a running back early and take on the risk of him missing games or just not working out this season, he needs to have the upside to offset that. And he needs to have the upside to be this year's Christian McCaffrey. Because if you drafted McCaffrey last year, your team did really, really well, which goes without saying. He had a massive leg up over the rest of the running backs. And this is an idea coined by Pat Kerrane, which is the legendary upside running back theory, which is just pretty much running backs are very fragile early on. If you're going to draft one, he needs to have the upside to offset the risk that an early round running back has. And the idea is that no early round running back has a high floor. They all get hurt more often and they all bust more often than the wide receivers in this range. And when we talk about these monster running back seasons, RB1 overall upside, we're actually really good at spotting these. If we look at the top 10 point per game seasons from running backs over the last 5 years, all of them besides Kyren Williams last year were drafted inside of the top 12 running backs, which means we don't have to chase them into rounds 4, 5, 6, 7. And even in a given year like 2024, where running backs are getting drafted as late as ever, we found the combined ranges over on ESPN and Sleeper in terms of where running backs are getting drafted. And we found roughly RB1 through 6 is going in round 1, RB5 through 10 is going in round 2, RB10 to 15 in round 3, and it's just combined ranges. So there's going to be some overlap, right? Because not every draft is going to have 6 running backs drafted in the first round, and then RB7 through 10 from there on. So there's some overlap here, but it's just to get a rough feel of how a home league draft might look. And based on this data, the top 12 running backs will be gone inside of the first 3 rounds, which is why that's where we're finding our Hero RB. We take the stab early because that's where the 20-plus point per game running backs come from, and then we chill and we build a really, really good team around that running back. Because if we chase the running backs into the dead zone or if we draft a bunch early, we're going to be giving up a lot of value at receiver, quarterback, and tight end. So why we avoid the dead zone is to not only build a stronger team, but because running back's a pretty brutal pick here. When we look at wins above replacement, shout out to Destination Devi. This is just a metric that compares apples to apples when we go across positions here, and it just looks at the replacement level player and how much value you're getting over that. And we look at the combined ranges in 2024, where running backs are getting drafted lower than ever, wide receivers are getting pushed up. We still see here wide receiver is still outscoring running backs in that dead zone of rounds 4, 5, and 6. Now, again, it's the combined ranges for running backs and then also wide receivers in 2024, looking at the last 5 years of data in this new environment. And there's still a big discrepancy, which you can see on the end here, of running back average wins above replacement plus minus. It's just the difference there, where through the first 3 rounds, it's actually pretty close. And then the biggest discrepancies come round 4, round 5, and 6. So here, we should be prioritizing wide receiver, or you can also prioritize quarterback and tight end, especially because you're going to have a lot of values. We actually just did this video the other day where we looked at the biggest values in your home league based on Sleeper, ESPN, and Yahoo default rankings. I'll make sure to link that video somewhere up top here so you can go watch it. But the wide receivers you can get in rounds 4 through 6 are ridiculous. You're getting values across the board. You can get Diggs, Malik Neighbors in the 4th, Tank Dell in the 5th, T. Higgins in the 5th. All of it's really good, and that's not even to mention the Roma Dunzeys you can get later, Brian Thomas Jr., JSN, all of those guys. So once you get to this part of the draft, we want to prioritize wide receivers. And then I will say as well, of course, you can't just draft 1 running back, 5 receivers through 6 rounds. So it's definitely important to note that we want to be drafting tight ends here as well and quarterbacks. We look at the wins above replacement for running back versus wide receiver versus tight end versus quarterback, something that you guys have asked me for a while now in my videos. I do want to give a big disclaimer. The tight end and quarterback sample size is much smaller, and I didn't find their combined ranges. I just did, okay, historically speaking, round 3 tight ends have done this, round 3 quarterbacks have done this, and then we found the wins above replacement. And you'll see, I mean, quarterback blows every position out of the water in round 3 and round 5 and 6. Tight ends do pretty well in round 3. They fall off a little bit in round 4, not great in round 5 and 6, and then sort of come back up in round 7 and 8. Again, these would really just be rough ranges. I wouldn't really take these and go too far with them. Again, it's a small sample. It's a little bit rough in terms of the equation here because it's important to note that quarterbacks and tight ends don't have the same upside in terms of wins above replacement as running backs and wide receivers. In my database over the last 5 years, the top 10 wins above replacement seasons have come from running backs and receivers. So it's important to note, right, where like quarterbacks by far and away the highest floor of any position in round 3, but they also don't have that like monstrous ceiling that a running back would have in round 3. So just important to note. But when we talk about the elite quarterbacks and elite tight ends, let's actually start with the elite tight ends. To me, Kelsey, Laporta are elite. McBride, Andrews, Kincaid are also elite. And then I also really like Kittle and Pitts. If I can get one of those 7, I feel really good. And then if I can't, my next 4 that I'm looking for are Ingram, Njoku, Ferguson, and Bowers. That's how I see the tier breaks there. And then we also have quarterback, where Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Lamar are all elite. But I also think that Stroud, Richardson are great. And then so are like Kyler Murray, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott. And if I go any lower than that to like Jaden Daniels, Purdy, Caleb, I'm probably drafting 2 quarterbacks. Now, after that, I wanted to put an emphasis on once we're out of the dead zone, we're hammering running backs, right? When we look at wins above replacement data, the difference between the running backs in rounds 5 and 6 in this new environment versus the running backs in rounds 7 through 8. So this is RB 16 to 24 in positional ADP over the last 5 years versus RB 23 to 32 over the last 5 years. It's been pretty much the same. You're talking 0.08 wins above replacement versus 0.05. So that's why we were passing on the running backs in rounds 5 and 6, is because you can get the same quality later on. And this was the area last year in that round 7, 8, 9, where you're getting Isaiah Pacheco, Rashad White, James Cook, Brian Robinson. Even later than that, you got Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane. You got a guy like Kyron Williams off of waivers. You got guys like Jerome Ford, Zeke Elliott off of waivers. I think Gus Edwards was off of waivers last year. So you can get a lot of really good players at RB2, which is what we're building this entire team for, where essentially, and I hate to keep using this metaphor, but it is pretty much the Infinity Stones, where you are building your team where you have a really, really good running back. You have solid quarterbacks and tight ends. You have wide receivers stacked so that all you have is one weakness, and it's your RB2. And the minute you find your Kyron off of waivers, or you find your Devon Achane later in a draft, or this year's Rashad White, you have that last Infinity Stone, and all of a sudden you have a super team. So that's really what it is that in this strategy is once you get to RB2, you just want to throw a bunch of quantity at the board, right? Where we are drafting, instead of like a backup quarterback, if you have Kyler Murray, don't draft a backup quarterback. I see people do that all the time. If you draft like a good quarterback or tight end, in a hero RB build, your bench needs to be prioritizing those running backs, right? Where you're drafting running back around 7, 8, 9, 10, a bunch in the teens. And you just have this stable where you're just sort of churning through, picking up guys off of waivers and trying to find a reliable RB2, which in years past has been pretty easy to find. You just need to have enough bullets in your chamber. Now, the last thing I want to touch on here is making sure you fill your flex with wide receivers, because the idea here is that we want the only weakness on this team to be your RB2. And if your weakness is RB2, having your RB3, which is worse than your RB2, in your flex spot is bad news. So we want to be building so we don't have that scenario. And the best way to do that is with my golden rule of having wide receivers through your flex spot plus another 1 or 2 by round 10. So if you have a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, that is 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, 3 plus 1 or 2. So that's 4 or 5. 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, that's 5 to 6 wide receivers by round 10. 3 wide receiver, 2 flex, 6 to 7, and so on. And that brings us to this recap where I just want to go through one more time. Again, to me, it is the best well-rounded strategy where it's going to work for beginners. It's going to work in every single league. It works in all formats. It is a beautiful strategy that sort of takes, again, the best elements of double hero RB, where we're still getting access to that RB1 overall season, and then zero RB, where we're making sure that we are strong at quarterback, tight end, and wide receiver. So again, you're taking your RB1 inside the first 3 rounds, trying to hit on the next legendary running back. You don't take your RB2 until round 7 or later. Your goal should be to have wide receivers through the flex plus 1 or 2 by round 10. Your goal should be to have an elite quarterback and or an elite tight end. And this strategy works in all formats. Now, the big disclaimer here is that if I was doing like a ranking, I would put Hero RB at number 1, but all draft strategies will work in a given year. To me, Hero RB is the most resilient, where last year double Hero RB flopped because the early running back sucked. Zero RB was amazing because the late round running backs were great. But Hero RB is going to work in any given year because McCaffrey was still great. So if you had McCaffrey as your Hero RB, your team was great. And if you got like Kyron off of waivers, you probably won your league in that scenario. So Hero RB is going to work in any given year, and it's amazing. But I will say, don't go, like the biggest thing that I can say, and I'm trying to put a big disclaimer in these videos, is I get these questions all the time. Hey, Ron, I'm picking from the 109 in my home league. Do you think I should go Hero RB here? Or should I go double Hero RB? We're going to make an early round draft strategy video here sometime this week. But the biggest thing I have to say is that let the draft come to you. Take the best values on the board through the first 3 to 4 rounds and then build your draft around that, right? Where maybe you draft Bijan up top and then you love the receiver value that comes around, then the receiver again and a tight end, and all of a sudden you have one running back through the first 4 rounds and you can start building your Hero RB team. I would just say let the board pick the strategy for you, but also before you go into the draft, know what strategies will and won't work, right? If it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex standard league, zero RB is not going to work for you, and then you can kind of sort of put your team down the lane of a double hero or a Hero RB draft strategy. Now, with that being said, let's get to our 3 mock drafts so you can see what these teams look like in practice in 2024. Now, before we get into these mocks, I did want to mention that for all of these drafts, I used my rankings, my top 200 over on Patreon. Check them out, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It is a top 200 cheat sheet. It's tiered. I have my target rounds that I'm targeting each player, and I have my targets and avoids all outlined on the cheat sheet. And the idea behind the cheat sheet is that, yes, it's my player takes, but it's also with the idea of drafting structurally sound teams where I am pushing up those running backs I believe have RB1 overall upside early on, and then making sure that in the dead zone you're prioritizing wide receiver, quarterbacks, and tight ends, and then round 7 on, instead of prioritizing those Jacoby Myers or Romeo Dobbs, you're prioritizing next year's Isaiah Pacheco or Rashad White. So it's a really good way of not forcing these draft strategies, but taking the best players in my rankings, and that will kind of lead you down the path of all the strategies we talk about here. You can find that over on patreon.com/Ron Stewart in the description or the comment section down below. All right, so our first mock draft here is actually my home league settings. We're going to do a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, half PPR league from the 104. And to me, the 104 is the best spot because you can land, to me, the best Hero RB candidates out there, and that is Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, and Breece Hall. Now, I do want to get your guys' take on this. Instead of just like showing you guys the entire board or taking 20 minutes of runtime to draft the team live for you guys, I think I'm just going to move like a black screen and just kind of reveal the picks as we go. Let me know in the comments how you guys feel about me doing this. But first we take Bijan, of course. I actually have Breece ranked ahead, but they're back-to-back for me, and I figured why not switch it up, go Bijan this time. Then we come back around in the second, and we take Chris Olave. Now, of course, he was on my fade list from Saturday, but that's in the mid-second or like mid to early second of an RB-hungry home league. Here, in a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, I felt the need. Why not take Olave? Achane didn't fall back to us. Kyren didn't fall back to us. It's clearly wide receiver heavy if Drake London is going to the 201. So we went with Chris Olave, and then we come back around in the third, and we grab Nico Collins. Now, of course, you can take whatever receivers you like here, whether that's Deebo Samuel, Jalen Waddle. If Laporta or Kelsey came back, that would have been a conversation as well. And then we get to the 4th round. And this is something that we know from our Saturday and Friday videos of the best values. Malik Neighbors is going in the 4th round of your home league. So we get a gift here. I would take Malik Neighbors as high as like the late 3rd. So now our wide receivers are looking pretty good. I will say, I debated elite tight end here, right, where I wanted maybe Mark Andrews or Dalton Kincaid, but know your draft room, right? We see Team 2 and Team 3 already have tight ends, so that's going to guarantee us one of those 2 tight ends, and that's what we do. We come back around, we get Mark Andrews. Now, I will say, I was really tempted to go with T. Higgins or Amari Cooper here, but we know that Sleeper is going to push up the tight ends. We also know that Sleeper is going to give you a lot of wide receiver values later on, so we bit the bullet and we got our first elite quarterback or tight end. Then we come back around in the 6th round, and we take Rashee Rice. Another home league gift. I would take Rashee Rice as high as the mid-4th, but ESPN, Sleeper, Yahoo across the board still has them buried in their rankings. So for now, we're going to take Rashee Rice here, and that gives us a wide receiver through the flex. The downside is, though, we get sniped on quarterback here. Dak and Kyler both go. Damn, it's not letting me push this down any further, but Dak and Kyler both go. So we take Xavier Worthy, and I think people are going to be a little bit apprehensive to pair Worthy with Rashee Rice. I can't stress enough, fellas. I've taken Nico Collins and Tank Dell on the same team. I will take Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy on the same team. If it's on a good offense that has the potential for 40-plus passing touchdowns, I don't mind taking the same pass catcher in the same offense or the same team. If it was like the Steelers or something, that's a no-go. But we're talking about the Chiefs. Both guys are attached to Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to pass up on a Worthy, or I was going to say like a Worthy value, for lack of better words, but I'm fine with that. And then we come back around in the 8th round, and we take our RB2 in Javonte. So now we have wide receivers through the flex, +1, elite tight end, and Javonte. And then we also get Caleb Williams here, which isn't that great. Right, we kind of do want a better quarterback and tight end in a hero RB build, but in a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league, it's going to be really hard to be stacked everywhere but RB2. Shallower lineups will help you out with that, but I still really like Caleb. We made sure we took a quarterback after that, and the rest of this draft, we hammer out those RB upside profiles like Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet. We get an upside shot at Dontavion Wicks. We get Ray Davis, Deshaun Watson, Bucky Irving, and that gives us our final squad here. And to me, this is a fine team that if this was my home league, I would be fine with this team. We have Caleb and Deshaun Watson. Hopefully, Caleb Williams can be really good this year. If not, we can always just play the waiver wire game, right? We saw last year CJ Stroud and Jordan Love were fine off of waivers. Javonte is a very fine RB2. Bijan has a ton of upside. Our receivers, Olave, Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, Rashee Rice, all really good. And you have the upside of Xavier Worthy off the bench and Dontavion Wicks. And then we have Chase Brown, Charbonnet, Ray Davis, and Bucky Irving as 4 running backs off the bench that we can start to churn and burn through waivers and try and find a really good RB2 if Javonte can't be that for us. And that brings us to our second draft here. This is from the 107 in a $350 NFC high stakes draft that we actually did the other night on stream. To me, this is the perfect, like, extreme hero RB. This is a 3 wide receiver, 1 flex, full PPR league. And we start up top with Amon-Ra St. Brown. At that 7 spot, I would have taken Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, whatever you want there. And then I came back around and JT goes, Jahmyr Gibbs goes, Achane goes. I would have loved Puka Nacua, to be honest with you, but we couldn't get any of those running backs to come to us, so we took Kyren Williams. I think some of you guys are going to be really upset we took Kyren over Saquon. That's a player take. This is a strategy video. I really like Kyren. He scored 21 points per game last year, something that Saquon hasn't hit since he was a rookie in New York. Kyren Williams has all the upside in the world. I really like him to have that RB1 overall upside. I don't know if I see the same for Saquon, but if you don't like that pick, feel free to just take Saquon here or just pretend that I took Saquon in this draft here. Then the third round comes around. This is third round reversal, but I figured at the 7 spot, that's not going to really affect us. We take Jalen Waddle to make sure that we get some wide receivers in this full PPR format. Then we get T. Higgins, which was kind of a gift in the 4th round. And then we took Amari Cooper, who in this format in the 5th is really, really strong. I debated maybe getting a running back or going tight end, but I knew in this format, I knew ADP, know your format, know your league members, that we would get an elite tight end. And that's what we get, George Kittle. So now we have wide receivers through the flex. We have our hero RB in Kyron, and we have an elite tight end in George Kittle, which I really like. Now, we actually take 2 wide receiver values I like here in Brian Thomas and Keon Coleman, and we pass up on the running backs because I just didn't like any of the values we got. If Montgomery made it to us in the 7th, I would have taken him. He didn't get there. In the 8th round, if Javonte got back to us, I would have taken him there. Nobody came back to us. We took Brian Thomas and we took Keon Coleman. But you're going to see those are the last 2 wide receivers we take. So if I go that wide receiver heavy, a really big thing and a big mistake I see people do is they'll do a hero RB draft strategy. They'll do something like this where they get really aggressive at wide receiver up top. But if you do that, you cannot take Romeo Doubs or Josh Downs or some random rookie wide receiver later. The rest of your team needs to be devoted to fixing your running back problem and your quarterback problem. And that's what we did here, where if you look at the rest of this draft, we went Tyjae Spears, so that's going to be our RB2, Rico Dowdle, Zach Charbonnet. Rico Dowdle has some upside to be the RB1 in Dallas. Charbonnet is just kind of a handcuff with like some upside there. I will say as well, it's 6-point passing touchdowns. Know your league. To me, Jared Goff stacked to Amon-Ra St. Brown and Brock Purdy stacked to George Kittle. We're already making the bet on Amon-Ra St. Brown, on George Kittle. If one of them smash, so does that quarterback as well. And in a 6-point passing touchdown league, Goff gets a big boost and so does Brock Purdy. And then we literally, again, hammer nothing but running backs. We go Audric Estime, Kamani Vidal, Marshawn Lloyd, Alexander Madison, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Take your favorite dart throws at running back and just have a stable, because we are just trying to take as many shots as we can at finding that RB2, because if we can find that RB2, this team is locked and loaded and is really good. And you might say, well, Ron, you have wide receivers through the flex. Like, why Brian Thomas? Why Keon Coleman? The whole idea of the wide receivers through the flex plus 1 or 2 is so that you can avoid having a weak flex in the event of injuries or bye weeks. Now, I also wanted to show one last mock draft that's a little bit more RB heavy and casual in a half PPR, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. And then we also have a little bit of a twist with this draft that you'll see later. We go Christian McCaffrey up top. To me, this is the, we have Bijan, Brees, and McCaffrey as our true hero RBs this year. And then the second round comes around at the 2-3 turn. We go Deebo Samuel and Mike Evans. The 49ers, like we talked about with the Chiefs and the Texans, when we talk about top 10 scoring offenses, I'm not as apprehensive towards drafting teammates. Now, I think 3 to 4 teammates is too much. You don't want your entire lineup to be just 49ers, but my wide receiver 1 and RB1, I have no issue both being on the 49ers. Then we come back around in the 4th and 5th round, and this is where we have a little bit of a twist. We go Trey McBride, so we lock up an elite tight end, and then we go Kenneth Walker. I know that the definition of hero RB is not taking a RB2 until round 7 or later, but I think in a league like this, where you can only start 3 wide receivers at a time, it's very much fine that if you find a value in James Cook late, or if you find a value in Kenneth Walker, I really just want to emphasize, don't be too strict. We talk about this all the time with fantasy football. Only a Sith deals in absolutes, all right? Hero RB, the definition is RB2 round 7 or later, but if Kenneth Walker comes to you and you like Kenneth Walker, you can draft him and kind of make a hybrid of a hero RB team and a double hero RB team, where you now are kind of treating Kenneth Walker as your second hero RB or just like a very high-end RB2. So now we don't have to hammer as many RB2 profiles later, and I wanted to show you guys what that looks like. So then after that, we go Kyler Murray, and then we also go Rashee Rice. Again, Rashee Rice is just a gift in these drafts. So now we have elite quarterback stacked to our elite tight end and Trey McBride. That's not a necessity for these. It just sort of happened that way. And then we get Rashee Rice. So now we have wide receivers through the flex. Brian Thomas Jr. is another wide receiver through the flex plus 1. And then we have JSN. So now we have wide receivers through the flex plus 2. And we have the luxury to do that because we have an elite quarterback, an elite tight end, and we already have 2 running backs drafted. Now the rest of the draft is something, again, that I've been preaching here, is that when you draft the wide receivers early, especially when you sort of splurge and you get the plus 2 through the first 10 rounds, you can just not take a wide receiver the rest of the draft and just worry about running backs. We take shots on Rico Dowdle, we take shots on Jalen Wright, Tyler Algier, and we just want as many shots, bullets in the chamber to sort of hit on that RB2 in case of Kenneth Walker or Christian McCaffrey don't work out, because to me, those 5 wide receivers are more than enough. Now, this is the team. Kyler, McCaffrey, Kenneth Walker, Debo, Mike Evans, Trey McBride, Rashee Rice. And then in the flex, we're going to have one of Rice, Brian Thomas, or JSN. And then we also have Rico Dowdle, Jalen Wright, Tyler Algier to just kind of churn and burn through waivers and rotate through off the bench. To me, this is a really, really nice team if you're drafting from the one spot in a more RB heavy format, and you still want to kind of use some sort of double hero or hero RB sort of strategy, and you don't get a running back to fall to you at the 2-3 turn that you like. So that's kind of what that would look like if you do dip your toe and take a dead zone running back. I would want it to look like Kenneth Walker or James Cook. We've done those videos in the past as well of the dead zone running backs I actually don't mind taking a stab on here. So that's going to do it for us today. I appreciate you guys checking out these videos. Of course, these take a while to make, edit, research. All I ask is that if you enjoyed, you leave a like, you subscribe, and again, if you want access to those top 200 rankings that I use that kind of filter you down these strategies, right, where I'm pushing up the legendary running backs, I'm pushing up the wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends in the dead zone, and then hammering those RB2 profiles, those are all over on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can find that in the description and the comment section down below. But if you can't support there, just leave a like, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold.